Yo, what's going on, everyone? Anubis here with a brand new review for you all today. There will be a number of reviews coming out from me, some new, some for older games that I didn't get a chance to review at the end of last year. So the last few months, there's games that came out like Dragon Age and Indiana Jones and Star Wars Outlaws, so I didn't do a review of. I will be doing reviews of those games, better late than never. But first, we'll get into some games that released recently, like Assassin's Creed Shadows, and today's review, South of Midnight. So today we start things off South of Midnight. South of Midnight takes place in the deep South. He's on lore from across the South, be it New Orleans, Georgia, or even South Carolina as backdrop for the game. In South of Midnight, you play as Hazel. We were on a journey to save her mom after a hurricane makes landfall. This journey for Hazel isn't just a journey to find her mother, but also one where she learns about herself, her family, its history, and the secret world hidden right in front of her. In South of Midnight, you'll be facing husk-like enemies of different variations, from thin, weak, generic enemies to big, hulking enemies, and enemies that can protect each other and revive enemies you don't unravel. What is unraveling? Unraveling is a mechanic in the game that you do after you defeat an enemy. It gives Hazel health, but also through upgrades can do AoE damage to other enemies near you. Since we're talking about the game's enemies, let's jump right into talking about the game's combat. Now, I will say I played the game on its hardest setting. I mention this because when you play a game on its hardest setting, the jank of a video game becomes more noticeable. When you play on the easier setting, you can do combat and you won't notice anything because of how easy the game is. Enemies are dying very easily. You're not getting hit a lot, and if you do get hit, it's like irrelevant damage. But when you're playing on hard difficulties, anytime you do get hit, when you feel like you perform a perfect parry or perfect dodge or anything like that, when it comes to like your weapon combos, you notice it way more when there's issues within the game's mechanics, when there's issues within a game's combat. This game's combat is pretty solid and it's fun. It's nothing crazy, and it devolves into the usual, spam your main attack and then throw in some abilities here and there when they aren't on cooldown. So you're not really like reinventing the wheel here when it comes to how this game's combat works. Where the jank comes in is when the camera, like a lot of modern action games, a lot of soul-like games. I wouldn't really call this a soul-like game, so don't get mad at me when I say the word soul-like. I'm just mentioning, all action games, action-adventure games, and including soul-like as well. When you play these games, these games that kind of follow the same, kind of lock on and how you face the enemies. When the camera decides to like kind of fuck off, it allows you to take damage you wouldn't normally take. It becomes an irritation, and this is a common issue we all experience when we play these kind of games. When it decides to derp out, making it to where you can't see your character or allow enemies to hit you, when naturally you probably be able to avoid the hit if you can see it, but you can't see it because your camera's fucking off. It's also very easy to get stuck on the edges in this game, unobstructable branches and enemies preventing you from doing your dodges. So let's say an example to give you, let's say you're in the middle of combat and it just happens to be a wooden plank within the combat range. Generally in this game, when it comes to combat, there's a big circular area cut off from the rest of the open world, and you're just inside of basically an octagon, if you will, for combat. But sometimes other things can be within that octagon, allowing you to get stuck on it. So you be rolling around, dodging around, fighting enemies, but then you kind of like dodge right into a wooden plank, and now you can't move because you're stuck on that wooden plank. Or this game is one of them games that, because it is not a hard game, air quotes, they try to compensate for not being hard by having a lot of gank situations. So you're constantly getting ganked in this game, and since you can get stuck on enemies, you'll be fighting one enemy or two enemies while getting stuck on a third enemy who's behind you, which prevents you from getting to like do your dodges in the way that you would want to. At the same time, dodging can sometimes be slow to respond, as you can hit the button to dodge, but sometimes the game doesn't register it correctly. This issue with registration inputs can also happen in the game's platforming, which is a major part of the game. This isn't just an action-adventure game, but also a platformer. So the platforming needs to be good, but as I said, there is jank. But for the most part, the platforming is quick and nice. I even said during my live stream that this game probably has the best wall running mechanics I've seen in any game, including the likes of Titanfall and the Star Wars Judgement series. The platforming in this game varies. You have the basic jumping with sometimes janky auto mantling. You can use your weaving powers to create objects from the past to allow you to make harder jumps or climbs. You can get your web slinging on by using the strands to swing mid-air to cover large impossible to reach gaps. When you don't have the jank moments, the platforming, though simple, is very well executed, effective, and fun, which is generally what you can say about the entirety of this game. It's simple but effective and fun. Sometimes you don't have to like do anything crazy, just make a very good video game and that's it. Just make a good game. This game doesn't do anything crazy, it's just fun. This game doesn't try to reinvent the wheel in any way, but it does everything it does well. That is a hell of a sentence. It does everything it does well. The story is a phenomenal experience. The entire voice cast is wonderful, especially Adrian Ray, who voices Hazel. Games like this, the voice acting is just as important as gameplay. It's going to sell and make or break the game. Some games you can have simplistic, generic, and even mediocre voice acting for everyone except the main lead, but here everyone had to be great, and they were. The story of South of Midnight is a wonderful experience. Its pacing is just right. The game's length is just right as well. To fit it, there's only about 14 chapters, and the 14th of those is just an epilogue. So only really about 13 chapters in a game. It's a game that's about 12 hours long if you just do, a straight playthrough. You can probably push that to about 15 hours if you're looking for everything around the game, the collectibles, things like that, reading all the notes, etc., etc., etc. It's not a full price game, but definitely gives the experience better than a lot of modern full price games. This is, like I think like $50. If you have Xbox Game Pass, obviously you're not paying $50 at all. You're just paying whatever you pay for Game Pass, and then you just play the game. But if you're not using Game Pass, you're paying $50, which is $20 less than what you would pay for, most modern video games. And with this game, you're getting, not as much content, because most modern single player games are about 80 hours long nowadays, but you're getting, a better experience because the story is really good. There's not many bugs and glitches in this game. Like I said, there's some jank, but I don't really consider jank to be a bug or a glitch. My score for South of Midnight is an 8.5 out of 10. It's a game I'd highly recommend. Its only negatives are the janky moments I've mentioned before that can be frustrating when playing on a higher difficulty. And if there was a nitpicky story complaint, it's that the climax of the game itself is a bit abrupt. I'm not going to do any spoilers. I try to avoid spoiling things in my reviews. But there is a moment of the game towards the end where it kind of just seemed like there's no real conclusion to in the way that you will want when it comes to certain people in Hazel's family, and it kind of just like just goes straight from there to just the epilogue, and it's kind of like, all right, it's kind of like, all right, I kind of wanted more here, not just how it ends. But that could just be me being nitpicky, probably not that big of a deal for a lot of other people. And outside of that, it's a wonderful game with a beautiful atmosphere, engaging story, interesting lore, and it's also a beautiful work of art visually. Didn't talk about it until now, but this game is gorgeous from an artistic standpoint. It's beautiful to look at, not just the cell shaded, claymation like character models, but also just the environment itself and how the colors are added to the game's beauty. South of Midnight is one of those games where all you gotta say is it's video game art. With all that said, that is it from me. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this short review. I've been your boy, AnubisArchangel. Stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. I've been your boy. I'm out of here. Deuces.